laughing, and he dropped back in, right? Anyway, Peter decided early that he would like to be in showbiz. His favorite TV show was the Carol Burnett Show. When I was cleaning his room one day, I found this letter, dated January 2nd, 1974, 12 Crescent Court, Lindsay, Ontario, Canada. Pretty smart for a 7-year-old. Dear Carol Burnett, I'm willing to join your show. My age is 7. My number is 3246642. Will you give me a call or write to me, please? To Carol Burnett, love, Peter Logan. Now, Peter's dad, as I'm sure most of you know, was a politician, which fascinated Peter. So when he was in grade 6, he decided his school should have a student council. Now, the school was at the top of the street where I lived, and while I was walking by one day, there was a huge poster out there that said, "Vote for Pete, he's real neat." Now, in his high school days, Peter attended Lindsay Central Collegiate, a school where his grandmother and I both taught. At this time, he landed the part of Linus in the musical Charlie Brown at the Academy Theatre of Lindsay. School children were bussed in from all around the county to see the show. And Peter ended up with a lot of fan mail, and he loved the recognition. He had finally made it into show business, and he was a happy little guy. Towards the end of the school year, Peter, pursuing his interest in politics again, was running for a position on the student council for the next year. But unfortunately for Peter, it was just the time that his father was appointed to the bench, and our family was moving to Barrie. Pete was devastated. It took him a number of months to regain his confidence, but eventually Peter started playing his guitar and piano, and he found friends with the same interests. In his final year at Barrie Central Collegiate, he did become president of the student council. So in 1989, after attaining a BA in political science and history, Peter decided to travel abroad. Now, when Hugh graduated, he married the love of his life, Patty, and they went off to France for a year. And when Jocelyn graduated from the University of Western Ontario with her CA, she became a Kontiki tour escort in Europe. And since there was a lot of sibling rivalry in our family, especially between Peter and Jocelyn, Peter had to go somewhere different. So he chose Japan. Now, Lindsay was twinned with Naoro, a city in northern Japan, and Peter had met our exchange students and many Japanese people we had entertained over the years. So he decided to go to Japan along with his friend Eric. Well, I didn't know Eric, but he was a great friend of Peter's, and Eric's brother is here today. And he met Peter in Singapore. So I think it's Mark, isn't it? Where are you?
You know what? I think it's a different Eric, but my brother lived with him for 20 years, lived in Singapore.
Oh, okay.
It was not Japan, but...
Oh, the Japan must have been a different
Right.
Eric. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
No
Okay. Okay, going to Japan was very difficult at first. I mean, you can't read the road signs, and when you ask people for questions, they don't know how to speak English. However, Peter, despite the challenges, he found accommodation and work. He was a great letter writer. I have a binder with all his letters, and some of them illustrated, and all very thoughtful and incisive. He worked as an English teacher in the evening for businessmen and also formed a band that did gigs between the various cities where he lived. Now, the last 2 years of when he was in Japan, he was an English teacher in the high school system in Amagasaki. As well as his teaching, he created the curriculum for all of the English classes in that area. And he was very surprised to learn that he was the highest paid English teacher in Japan. Wow. Kind of amazing. Now, Sand and I were anxious to get him home at this point. And I just wonder if somebody could bring me a little glass of water from the back. Oh, right here. I saw it. Isn't he wonderful? I speak and he works. Thank you. Anyway, so Peter was at that time too. He thought he'd like to get home. And he asked the supervisor of instruction, Mr. Kane Katata, for a letter of recommendation. So I'm going to read that letter of recommendation from Mr. Kanate. Peter has served this city with honor and distinction for the past 2 years. It is often difficult for a person to live and work in a foreign culture. Peter was able to adopt and come to understand the Japanese mind and culture very well. I believe that we will need people like him in the future to help build a bridge between East and West. He has demonstrated leadership ability, strong interpersonal skills. I am confident that he will be a welcome addition to your program. His experiences will be of benefit to you. So that was the letter sent from Japan for Peter, who then went to Capilano College for a 2-year course, postgraduate course. And where am I here? Okay, I was just going to say he went there, and I recently had an email from Peter's friend Brian Faulkner, who was living in Vancouver, saying that he fondly remembered sharing lots of great shenanigans with Peter when he and Michael Cayley were attending Capilano College. And the focus of Peter's studies at Capilano was the internet and telecommunication industry in Asia. So although Peter now spoke basic Japanese, he opted to study the Indonesian language while at Capilano. This led to being placed in the second year to a remote area in Sulawesi, Indonesia, with INCO, the International Nickel Company. He said the mine site was quite ugly, but the surrounding area was unbelievably scenic. One thing he did there was to set up their email, and also he learned to speak Indonesian fluently. So this was very helpful, because when he finished there, he intended to come home, but went on a vacation to Bali, where they do speak Indonesian. And we were expecting him to come home, but instead, while there, he partnered with a Balinese businessman who funded him. He created the Bali Travel Web, which was basically a tourist guide to the island. And this, it was a lot of work, but in 2 months after creating the concept and doing the design and programming, it was up and functioning on the internet. This was 1998. And he was a pioneer in doing this sort of thing. So he had every intention of returning home. However, he got an offer he couldn't refuse, and this came from Singapore. Now I've got here a magazine from Microsoft. There's a young Bill Gates on the front of the magazine, and there's an article of Peter in here. And All right. Okay, this article with Peter. Finding fun is a major objective for the MTV Internet. So he's there with the MTV, according to the man behind it. Internet manager Peter James Logan, in just 5 months, he planned, designed, and set up the site, which has been hit by millions of fans since its launch in November. Now I'm just skipping a bit here. Now, Peter is saying for MTV, we can't just put something on the internet. We wanted the most creative we could find. Logan says if you create a website, you handle 3 major aspects: design, content, and technical programming. We took the classic approach by organizing the content from the storyboarding site. Perhaps even more challenging was the second part of the project, the website's design. In addition to matching the towering standards of the television channel, it had to be easy access. We didn't want this to be cliched, said Logan. On the net today, everyone wants to be a techie. But instead of a really splashy site with heavy graphics, we wanted something simple to download. In internet terms, the whole idea was to balance design, content. So Peter was now back in showbiz and a celebrity. And one happy outcome of having a child living in a faraway place was that his dad and I had amazing trips to Singapore and Bali. And Peter intended to come home again, but then he met and fell in love with a lovely woman, Tina Jody. They had a fairy tale wedding. Peter was happy in Asia. He relished the climate, no winters to deal with. He particularly enjoyed haggling in the outdoor markets. He was a great cook, and he came to prefer Asian food to Canadian cuisine. He loved animals. He and Tina had 3 ragdoll cats. And he did many more things in Asia, but I'm going to sum this up. Oh, and also he played ball hockey with Mark's brother, Eric. Isn't that right, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, before I turn the podium over to the next speaker, this is all about Jocelyn right now. I must add that I will be forever grateful to Jocelyn for her love and commitment and her bravery, for flying over to Peter and rescuing him. That was no easy task, and bringing him home to us. Thank you, my lovely daughter, Jocelyn. Okay. Now I turn the podium over to you.
And I also would like to thank everyone for coming. I received so many lovely emails and memories from people who knew Peter. It was really enlightening, some of the emails, and Mom referred to one of them from William Bailey. Oh. Yes. Anyhow, it talked about his time in Vancouver at the course that he was taking, and little did we not know, he went over there, he took the course, and he graduated from there. Little did we know that he had actually been officially accepted. But he went to all the classes, and he came, and William said he became so instrumental in setting up the web page, the web chats, dealing with all the computer stuff. They couldn't let him go, and they accepted him. So I thought that was a nice thing. And then someone mentioned his smile, his laugh, his creativity, and the willingness to work hard at everything he did. Hugh and I have had many laughs. Well, we reminisce about our childhood and Peter. And I mentioned to Hugh, I was the bull in the china shop, and the well-behaved one. Hugh is the one who always was disciplined, and Peter is the one who knew how to get away with everything, with that smile. And of course, he was the youngest, and Mom and Dad had enough of, I guess, us two. Mom once asked me to help Peter with his math. I just couldn't understand how he could not see the calculus formulas. And something must have rubbed off because he was very good with computers. While I was, Peter and I were only 13 months apart. We were 2 grades apart, and we did have our own set of friends. But they did mingle once in a while, and Mom related to it when he was Linus as Charlie Brown. The one who played Lucy was my best friend, Sandy. And Sandy tells me the story of when she had to go like this to Peter, she really went like this to Peter. Peter thought he was the younger brother. Mom once, we shared many summers and memories at our cottage, walking to Court the Dairy, roller skating, jumping off the bridge into the lake, and playing family games with our cousins. We really did have a great childhood. But moving to Barrie after 9th grade was great for Peter, as he was no longer just the little brother, but he could excel on his own path. He joined the student council and made lasting friendships, which you'll hear from Chris. But I do remember a funny story of Peter and voting. As you know, Mom and Dad, huge into politics. And Mom had been at the, down at the voting center and checked the rolls. And comes home and phones Peter. Peter, have you voted? Of course, Mom, I voted. And she goes, no, you didn't. I already checked. Jocelyn, go pick up your brother. So I had to go drive to Chris's house, pick up my brother, bring him over to the voting station. He had to vote. He walks into the house and Mom goes, who'd you vote for? As you all know, liberal family. He goes, conservative. Mom was not too happy on that one, but I still remember that to this day. Well, in many ways, we were different. We did like to travel. As you know, Peter went to Asia and I went to Europe around the same time. But we did have the chance to meet in various countries, and if you look at the slideshow, you will see us in Australia, Indonesia, and Singapore. And in Bali, Peter knew everything. And so he said, I am going to book you a milk bath spa treatment, and it is the best. And I can say it was the best. He loved his food, and he liked spice way more than I did. And he was a great cook, and willingness to try new foods. Well, the last few years of Peter's life have been challenging in the battle of the disease of alcoholism. He still had those moments where he would call me and we could just chat. He always made the attempt to reach out. He made that effort to dress well, eat healthy. I hope that Peter's soul is finally at peace.
Thanks. Monique?
For those of you who don't know Chris and Peter were inseparable here in Barrie at high school. Chris was the first friend that you guys got together, and like I say, when I come home, it was, I gotta go to Chris's, I gotta go to Chris's, I gotta go to Chris's. This is the famous Chris.
And Chris did all our video.
And Chris, yes, I'm gonna say that.
Hi, how do you do? Yeah, 1982, my family, we moved from Montreal, Quebec, and Peter, I remember the very first day at school, meeting Peter for the very first time, and it was friends right as soon as we met. You know how sometimes you get a connection with people, and you can just tell, and we never had a dull moment. We never had an awkward moment, the two of us together. We're very much like, he was like a brother to me, and we took care of each other. And that is one of the things that I remember most about him. I just want to say thank you all for being here as we remember and celebrate the life of our dear friend, Peter Logan, who left us so unexpectedly on December 29th. As I stand here, filled with a mix of sorrow, but also gratitude. Sorrow for the loss of such a remarkable person, Peter had a way of getting into your, psyche. You would begin to laugh with him, and then that laugh would become so infectious that you'd find it hard to breathe. Yeah, he's the only person I've met in this world that could ever do that to me and do it so often. We also feel gratitude for the countless memories that we shared with him. Peter was very much we were just more than friends, we were like brothers. And he was a beacon of joy. When we thought about Peter, whenever he was coming to, again, from his trips from overseas and such, you just knew that there was going to be joy. Yeah. It's difficult to capture the essence of my friend in words, but I'll do my best to honor him. We had very similar interests. Not just the music part and enjoying that part, but playing music. Many of you may not know it. Pamela has spoken about his letters, but Peter also wrote a lot of poetry. And many of his poems were turned into music, which we played for many people. As we would go to the parties around town and such, we had a very large group of friends. As we got older, Peter and I would have a lot of fun where he'd visit and we would be at a campground and we would just play for beers. And it got stupid because we had to literally stop because it was just getting ridiculous and how much people would just keep bringing beers. It was getting crazy. There are many days that have passed that we did not actually get to hang out together. And as Jocelyn had mentioned, Peter did not have a problem with reaching out. If there's one thing that Peter taught me is that we should never hold back from each other. If there is someone that you want to talk to or speak to, someone you're remembering, that you're thinking about, use your time wisely. Just reach out to each other. This life that we have in front of us is not about the places we go or the things that we do or the things that we collect. This life is really about spending time with one another and the memories that we have together. I got to spend a lot of time with the family, with the Logan family, which I'm so appreciative of, and I got to get to know, Hugh. And over the years, we got to work at Honda Canada together and spend a lot of time together. It was good for me, though I may not have had Peter around because he was overseas. I had that constant reminder every time I saw Hugh. So he filled that little joy part, of the day. There was that smile and that thing that the Logan family has. Thankfully, they were very patient with me and Peter during our teenage years and our shenanigans. I can't really talk about, I don't want to, maybe privately we'll talk about it, but we get in a lot of trouble. We got in a lot of trouble. It's legal now, but there was a time when Mrs. Logan found what she thought was tea at Peter's bedside, which apparently he had gotten from my place. So, how are we going to explain this to your mom? Many years later, after dating many different ladies, I was very fortunate in my life early on to find a lady of my dreams, and my wife and I, Monique, have been married together for going on 34 years. 1991, and like so many, the Logans, Hugh and Patty, and Dave, and Sylvie, there's many, I can't say many, but it's wonderful to have a group of friends that we're still together, you know, and we're part of each other's lives. Eventually, Peter decided to go to Japan and teach English and start his life, and we missed him desperately when he was away, but we always stayed in touch. His work then took him to Singapore, where he met a wonderful woman, who's mentioned Faustina. She was wonderful. She's a wonderful woman. A real gem. Monique and I and our children got to get to know them, and we adored their Uncle Pete, and miss him as well. I'm going to introduce my wife, Monique, now to speak.
What to say? So much. I'll try to keep it brief. Well, from the moment that I met Peter Logan, his infectious spirit was evident. He had this absolutely incredible ability to find joy in this very smallest of things and to turn ordinary moments into extraordinary memories. Whether we were exploring new places, sharing stories over a meal, or simply just enjoying each other's company, Peter's presence always made everything brighter and more meaningful. His sense of humor was unmatched, as we all know. Peter had a way of making us laugh so hard until our sides ached, no matter what the situation was. His quick wit and his playful nature brought so much joy and happiness into our lives. He had a gift for finding the humor in life's challenges, teaching us all to take things a little less seriously and to embrace the fun and absurdity that life often offers. But beyond the laughter, Peter was an adventurer at heart. He approached life with a sense of curiosity and wonder, and it was truly inspiring. Whether we were embarking on a spontaneous road trip, or going to a party, hiking through unknown trails, or just simply exploring the nooks and crannies of our city, Peter's adventurous spirit was always leading the way. He taught us to be fearless, to embrace the unknown, and to seek out the beauty and excitement in every moment. But more than the fun and the adventures, Peter enriched our lives through his kindness and genuine care for those around him. He was always there with a listening ear, a comforting word, or a helping hand. His compassion and generosity knew no bounds, and he touched the lives of so many with his unwavering friendship and love. As we gather here today, let us remember Peter, not with sadness for what we have lost, but with gratitude for what we had the privilege to experience. Let us carry forward his legacy of laughter, adventure, and kindness. Let us honor him by living our lives with the same joy and passion that he brought to us every day. Peter, you will be deeply missed, but your spirit will live on in our hearts and in the countless stories and memories that we share. Sorry, I promised I wouldn't cry. Thank you for the laughter, the adventures, and the unwavering friendship. Rest in peace, beloved friend. We also wanted to add that we all went through a ton of photos of Peter in his younger years and then his teen years and adult life, and we reminisced and shared and laughed, and we put together this lovely slideshow that you've been looking at so that you could also enjoy some of the times that you remember with Peter. And this video, we're hoping to upload it to YouTube, so that if you prefer to watch it privately, that would be something. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Jake, that was lovely. Guess what? There might be a little overlap. We didn't get together and discuss beforehand, so I apologize. But I do have some unique material for you, which I think you will appreciate. Thinking what to say for my brother's celebration of life, you know, it was a little difficult because I didn't really know my brother since we grew up in high school, in Lindsay. And then they moved to Barrie at the same time that I went to Toronto to college. So that was back in 1979. That was 45 years ago. And since then, I didn't really have a lot of contact with my brother. So reflecting on this, and even when I was there, I went back to Lindsay, Bob Cage, and Peterborough area where Peter sort of made his home and buried. So for today's remembrance, I've divided Peter's life into 3 distinct parts. The early days growing up in Lindsay, the promising future, Barrie Central University, and life in Asia, and finally his return from overseas. In the early days, in my opinion, we were just a typical family growing up in small town Ontario. Peter and I were 4 years apart in age, which is a big difference when you're young. He had his friends, I had mine. We had normal sibling rivalries that you would expect in a family of 3 kids. Unlike my sister Jocelyn, who always did everything right, Peter was more like me, and he got into more mischief. The only difference was he was a little smarter than I was, as I was always seen to be that was getting caught and disciplined. Peter did have some famous incidents, like the frantic neighborhood search for Peter, where he was found several miles outside the town of Lindsay on Highway 36 with his friend Billy Coe. Peter and Billy were trying to take the 20-mile trip to Bob Cajun on a tricycle and a push pedal chitty chitty bang bang. Even at an early age, as Monique mentioned, my brother was an adventurer. I remember fondly our family dinners, holiday celebrations, and family vacations. Peter taught me the art of slipping our dog food from our dinner plates that we couldn't quite see ourselves eating. Most of the time, this is sort of repeated my sister, the most time we spent together was our summers in Bob Cajun at the family cottage. There, away from Lindsay friends with no TV, we had to make our own fun. Our summers were great. Swimming, boating, fishing, jumping off the railway bridge, walking to town to the Kawartha Dairy, roller skating, movies, playing with our cousins, hide and seek, flashlight tag, reading, and many more things. It was a great time to be a kid. Another summer activity that will always live in Logan lore was the annual trip to Camp Keenan. This is where I realized that my brother and I were 2 very different people. I did not like being the center of attention and was uncomfortable in front of an audience. My brother, on the other hand, loved attention, and the more people he could entertain, the better. Camp Keenan was the perfect place to hone those entertainment skills. A good example of this was our dining entertainment. Now I'm going to create the scenario here. The entire camp would eat at what was called the mess hall. There was 15 cabins. There was approximately 10 campers per cabin with 2 counselors, including all staff. There was probably over 200 people eating together. After lunch and dinner, there was announcements, storytelling, and the counselors would lead skits and sing songs between the tables up the center aisle. Sometimes there would be a call to the campers for an impromptu act. My brother could hardly wait to get out in front of the entire camp. Now, I don't think his act was particularly well thought out. And I think it came to about 30 seconds before he actually leaped to the center of the stage in front of the mess hall. And fortunately for him that day, they had been serving bananas. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you remember back in the early 70s, the Chiquita banana commercial. There was a young Hawaiian-looking lady dressed in a grass skirt that sang a jingle and performed a dance. That memory was all my brother needed. He peeled the Chiquita banana sticker and stuck it to the middle of his forehead, and then proceeded to gyrate up and down the middle of the mess hall singing that he was a Chiquita banana. Well, I wanted to crawl under the table. But my fellow campers and staff, to that day, my brother became a legend. In fact, he was called on quite regularly to perform this routine. He earned the nickname Banana Boat. The mess hall would be quiet, and you would hear a counselor go, "Banana Boat." And then another counselor would join in and go, "Banana Boat." And then all the campers and all the counselors, 200 screaming people would chant, "Banana Boat, Banana Boat, Banana Boat." Once the chanting hit a crescendo, my brother would leap up into the middle of the mess hall. The routine was now well honed. Off would come his shirt, it would be tied to his head like a scarf, and with a necklace adorning his bare chest, he gyrated up and down the middle aisle, and the camp would go crazy. Now, I was accomplished at camp. I excelled in sports, soccer, ball hockey, long distance running. But you think I was remembered for any of my accomplishments? No. I was remembered as the brother of Banana Boat Logan. That's my claim to fame. This is the Peter Logan that most of you knew, the over-the-top, flamboyant personality who loved to entertain and endeared himself to those who met him. As my mother said the year before he moved to Barrie, he was in a local production of Your Good Man, Charlie Brown. When my family moved to Barrie, I would only see Peter on special occasions like Christmas and Easter. I remember coming home from school one Christmas to find a very excited Pete. I thought that being away so long, he was just happy to see me. That wasn't the case. The source of his excitement was a big wrapped gift under the Christmas tree labeled to Hugh and Peter, but mostly for Peter. Peter spent the next couple of days explaining to me that it was a guitar amplifier. The amplifier would have to stay in Barrie, so he would get to use it more, obviously. But when I came home, I'd be entitled to use it too. So Christmas morning came. Peter donned the Santa cap, which in our house meant you were designated to hand out the gifts. Normal decorum dictated that usually you would give the other a gift before you took one of your own. In this case, Peter's excitement was too overwhelming. That was the first gift that was trotted out, was this big box to Hugh and Peter, but mainly for Peter. Since the gift was mostly for Peter, he felt that it was his duty to open it, and he tore into it with such glee and excitement. Now, I'm not sure if you all knew my father, but if you did, you would know that he had an interesting sense of humor. As the gift opening was coming to a heightened climax, the box was ripped open to reveal the new family electric snow shovel. This gift was made even more ironic by the fact that my brother was adverse to physical labor. When the chores had to be done, Peter had a magical talent to disappear. He had worked the entire day on a computer or on intellectual pursuits, but breaking a sweat really wasn't his thing. I know this as I was voluntold several times to look after Peter at the cottage when my parents were away on trips. Frequently, we were given a list of chores that the two of us had to accomplish before they returned. Getting Peter to address the work at hand was like trying to push water uphill. The task we were charged with one year was staining the deck around the cottage. I was to stain the deck around our cottage, and Peter was to stain the deck around my grandmother's. Peter procrastinated until the day before my parents arrived home, and then, kaboom! There was stain explosion at my grandmother's place like you had never seen. Peter had innovatively procured rollers and the biggest brush that he tied to a broom handle. A lot of stain hit the deck that day quickly, but the quality of work wasn't really a prime consideration. In Barrie, I mainly admired my brother's accomplishments from afar. Peter did well in high school, and one year became the student president. I remember Peter creating his campaign poster. Years earlier, there had been a movie called Logan's Run. I'm not sure if you remember it from the 70s. Peter's campaign slogan was Logan's Running, which he thought was very clever. That slogan, combined with his campaign promise to provide softer toilet paper to the school washrooms, put him over the top and won him the election. All right, Pete. My brother also had other natural talents, because Peter had no musical training. He taught himself to play guitar and keyboards. Peter's best friend, Chris, who really is a naturally gifted musician, and we're inseparable. And Peter brought Chris to my stag in Cajun, and they played at my stag. And that was still a good memory for me. And Chris, who besides being a talented musician, is also a great videographer. And he put together this Peter's life and with the pictures here, and I'd like to thank you, Chris, for doing that for us. That's great. My brother left Barrie with big dreams. After graduating from U of T, he was going to Japan with the idea of creating a business selling Laura Secord chocolates, maple syrup, and other Canadiana. Peter started out teaching English to the Japanese businessmen, but did something that most language teachers didn't get to do. He was hired in the Japanese high school system teaching English. Having worked at a Japanese company, I know that this would have been considered a big honor because it meant that Peter fit in. He was trusted. That's something that's hard to do in Japanese culture. After this, he decided to go to Capilano College and take their highly regarded Asian Studies program. The last part of the course was a placement in Indonesia where Peter worked and created the websites for Bali, which my mother had talked about. But he taught himself to do that, which is a pretty good thing, that he had that talent. And we talked about Tina. Lovely. We met Tina several times, and she was a lovely woman. After we thought he was doing great there, he had a great social circle. He was playing ball hockey. He loved the tropical climate. He loved the food. And then one year he came home from Christmas without Tina. Something seemed to have changed. He still had his great sense of humor, but he was more withdrawn. He did not adjust himself to the time in Barrie. Instead, he wanted to maintain Singaporean time. He stayed up all night, slept most of the day. We thought it was a little odd, but we didn't think much about it. Another Christmas trip home, it blatantly became clear that Peter had a problem with alcohol. He went back to Singapore, and this was the beginning of the end. After struggling with his afflictions in Asia, Peter came back to Barrie thanks to my sister, who single-handedly both rescued and organized his return to Canada. I remember at the time that I wasn't quite keen on him coming back. My opinion was that he first needed to face up and overcome his addiction. I had faced a similar issue quitting smoking and understood the willpower required to overcome cravings, and I couldn't understand why he couldn't muster the willpower to overcome alcohol. Peter was like me. He was smart enough, understood the consequences of his health, enjoyed living. He had a good family support if he needed. What went wrong? Why wasn't he trying harder? I was upset. Why wasn't he putting forth the effort? It was through my brother that I learned that addiction is not a choice. It's not a character flaw. It's a disease. Peter can no more control his disease than the cancer patient can control their cancer. Once I viewed it through this lens, the relationship with my brother became less problematic and much closer. Peter went through cycles of abuse, rehabilitation, and periods of sobriety. During the last phase, my brother was a pleasure to be with. He would revert back to his old self with a good sense of humor. He loved to cook, go out to restaurants, coffee shop, play guitar, and various other projects he had taken a shine to. Peter should not be defined by the disease that robbed him of the later part of his life, because there's much more to him than that. It was those who truly experienced Peter enjoyed his creativity, sense of humor, showmanship, sensitivity, and passion, and all the things he engaged in, and that's what we most remember about Peter. Thank you.
I'd just like to play a song that helps us remember Pete. Just enjoy the song. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Chris, for putting that together. All right. While the song was on, the food was being unwrapped. So we welcome everyone to come over and, continue socializing and have some food. And we look forward to talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.